I first became aware of a movie called The Thing when I saw the original film. It was 1952, and I would have been about 4 or 5 years old. I think I saw it in a re-release. It was one of those films where, as you watched it, it was so frightening that my popcorn flew out of my hands. In other words, when they went up to the doorway and they had this a Geiger counter, they opened the door and he's right there, I went nuts. I went crazy. And then I subsequently read the short story in high school, and I realized it was a lot different than the movie. What they'd done in the first film was kind of make the James Arness monster more like a Frankenstein creature. Yes, he could. He was a kind of a vegetable that could reproduce various life forms, but he wasn't the imitator, the creature that could imitate any life form from the original story. The John W. Campbell story, Who Goes There, was basically an Agatha Christie kind of 10 Little Indians. You know, this creature is in your midst, and he's imitating either one or all of us, who's human and who isn't. And that kind of an idea really fascinated me. And as soon as we had finished Escape from New York and it was being released, I started to work on The Thing. And we started writing from scratch. Basically, Bill Lancaster wrote an original screenplay and started all over again. There were several drafts of Toby Hooper had done, I can't remember his name now, his partner had done a draft, and there had been some short story treatments by various people. But we started over, and the studio liked what we were doing and approved it, and off we went.
Well, the short story itself was, I wouldn't say it was a really great one, although it's a very admired one in the science fiction realm, back in the late 30s. And I think it was the first story to deal with this shape-shifting, body snatcher type element and all that stuff. Curiously, that's not what 100% attracted me to the piece. It was more the ambiance and all the characters involved and the mood of it, the enclosure and elements of the paranoia. And the short story was a stepping stone to take advantage of all those kinds of elements. From the story and the film, I loved the idea of being trapped in Antarctica. These people working up there for whatever reasons. Horrible winter, freezing conditions, cold, and there's a monster lurking.
One of the big keys to me in making The Thing was discovering John Lloyd. You see, I had come from low-budget filmmaking, and I had never really worked in a studio situation, and John came along with enormous enthusiasm and knowledge and a great eye.
Well, essentially, I was working for Universal Studio at the time, and the script came across my desk, and I read it and said, my God, this is probably one of the best science fiction films I've ever read in my life. And then I heard about John Carpenter. He was coming on the lot, and I heard about his reputation. And I made a connection with one of the production managers to talk to him and then arrange an interview. And I took my drawings and things up and talked to John and ended up getting the show.
I met John, I'm not sure what year it was, but it was just before Halloween. It was for Halloween. Deborah Hill introduced us, and John decided that we would probably make a good team, and so we worked on Halloween. And that I guess was such a good experience for both of us that we began a series. And I worked on The Fog and Escape from New York, and then subsequently The Thing.
One of the crucial decisions we had to make was on the special effects and whether or not to hire, what kind of an effects person to go with and what kind of a concept to go with. And I chose Rob Bottin.
I saw Halloween, and I instantly became a John Carpenter fan. He was, that film is just amazing. It amazed me. And I had the fortune of working on a picture, which was a Roger Corman film, Rock and Roll High School. I met Dean Cundy. He did an amazing job on Halloween. I was also a big fan of him as a cinematographer and director of photography. And I begged him to introduce me to John Carpenter. I said, I got to work with this guy. So I went in, I met John, and he was shooting The Fog. And I said, you know what? Do you have any creepy kind of characters that, are in this movie? I said, I'd love to play it. You got anything like the guy with the mask in Halloween or whatever? He said, as a matter of fact, I do. And actually just sort of burst in on this meeting, and he's going, who's this guy? The dean, right? And I'm like going, I'm your big fan, right? And, I asked him this question, and he said, stand up. I thought he was going to say, and get out, right? When I was hitting him up for this part, And he looked at me a second. He goes, you got the job. Be there tomorrow. You got to do this with the makeup, this. So I got to work with him, and I was very happy, and we had a good working relationship and really had a lot of similar interests and things. And he said, guess what? He goes, I'm going to do a movie called The Thing. And I said, you're kidding me. You're going to remake The Thing? And he said, yeah. He says, that's the idea. And he says, I want you to make The Thing. Right. And I went, oh my God, this is fantastic, And, actually, after I did The Fog, I actually did a picture called The Howling. And it was such a big success for me. And I was about 20 years old when I did that. And I think I finished up the project when I was 21. And John saw the movie, and he called me up one day and he said, you got to get in here. We're doing the movie now. We're doing The Thing. You got to get in here.
He came in with a wild concept, which is that the thing can look like anything. It doesn't look like one monster. It looks like anything. And out of this changing shape, this imitation, comes all the creatures throughout the universe that the thing has ever imitated. And it uses these various forms. And Rob was very daring in his approach. I must say, even sometimes I was doubtful as to whether he'd pull it off.
After we had finished the storyboard process, I piled them all up, went walking back up to, Carpenter's office. And he said, let's see what you got, like that. And we pinned them all up on the wall, covering all of his office walls. Then again, he looked at me and he said, do you know how to do all this stuff? And I said, no, So that was really the challenge of that picture. And what was great about it was that John actually did give me a great opportunity to say, hey kid, go nuts, and use your imagination. And he was so supportive during the whole process that it was just, a real amazing thing to happen to a 22-year-old.
And I started casting with Kurt Russell wanted to play the lead. And he was the kind of linchpin. And then we looked at every good actor we could find and assembled a great cast.
John was trying to cast the role of MacReady, and we spent some time together talking about that, trying to think of other actors. I wasn't involved with the movie. And he was casting the movie and had some of the other roles cast pretty much, when he was not finding what he wanted for MacReady. And I gave him some suggestions, and we just as friends, we were just talking about it. And then I guess it was about 3 weeks to go, or a month, maybe less than that, he came to me and he said, what would you think about playing it? And so then I really read it and said, yeah, I thought it'd be a lot of fun. At that time, we were going to try to do definitely a strictly ensemble piece where MacReady was just one of the group and very slowly came out of the group to have to sort of deal with the thing at the very end. And that kind of changed slightly once we discovered that we had, these makeup and these wardrobe problems where everybody looked the same.
I was asked to come in for another role. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was. And after I got there, John and I were talking, and we had known each other socially a little bit. And I said, listen, what are you thinking about Clark, the dog handler? He said, I haven't really focused on that role yet. And I said, well, that's the one that interests me the most. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. He said, why? And I said, because there's something about him, the fact that he's more connected to the animals than he is to the people. I see him as a kind of loner, sort of strange other entity in the group. And I think he liked that, and I like the fact also he was sort of the red herring, the one that everybody thought was going to be the carrier.
And we had the whole cast together, and we went over to Universal, and we sat around the table the first couple of days and talked about the script and talked about what characters needed and wanted and so on and so forth. And then we worked on mostly the psychological aspects of it. That's what was most interesting, at least the way that the script, stripped of all the special effects. When you first read the script, I never read the monster turns here and blah, blah, blah. I just look at the scene. So we had a chance to work on that first, and probably good, because once we started shooting, the technical aspects began to take predominance.
I remember at one point in the pre-production, John Lloyd came to me and said, okay, here are our options. We're going to have to go probably up to British Columbia and shoot this on a glacier.
In looking for somewhere to build the set for the Antarctic ice camp, they opted for Stewart, British Columbia, because it was purportedly one of the highest snowfalls areas, accessible easily. So we were, I would say, 6 months ahead of when we would be shooting. We were choosing the spot. It was a little knoll on top of a mountain that was accessible by a one-lane road that was also used by the mining company.
The mine road had only been opened briefly, and it was shut down after that, so it was kind of a unique thing to find. Because you just don't drive on top of glaciers, you don't do it. And here is this place, and it worked. It was just right there, and the only one problem, there were trees to one side, so I built the side of the set to hide that under normal shooting so you wouldn't see it.
My responsibilities were the opening title sequence, which involved fabrication of the miniature spaceship, which was actually built by a person named Susan Turner.
This is a spaceship from the opening sequence of The Thing, used in 2 shots. It's principally made of ABS plastic. I made it out of that so we could it could help hold all the heat that would be generated by these 144 lights we have circulating. There's also a light in the dome, which is made of hammered brass. It was actually flat when it was etched, and it was hammered into shape in wood form. I wanted you to be able to see the lights at a continuous intensity through the grating instead of little hot spots or what you usually would get with a grain of wheat light. And there's infinite values of intensity and speed on this too. So when we got in and saw what speed we needed to have it go at to give the right effect, we would have the option of making the lights go faster or slower, or be brighter or duller.
The actual title itself, when I did the effect for the title, what I used when the title comes, the spaceship flies by and then the title comes and burns on, the way that was done, we had like a fish tank that was about, 4 feet wide by 2 feet high. And I put smoke in the fish tank, and then on the back of the fish tank I put the title, The Thing. I drew it on an animation cell. Behind that I had a piece of garbage bag plastic, which I stretched over a frame. And behind that I had a light, which was pointed up through the letters. And when I photographed it, I hit the garbage bag plastic with little flame, like a match. I would just light it around the garbage bag plastic, and then the garbage bag plastic would open up and let the light come through the letters, and that's how the letters look like they form and, and burn on with the rays and everything. It was actually a very simple process.
I worked with Albert Whitlock for the first and only time I've worked with him. I've been a great fan of his work, and he's a man of unique talent. He does amazing things with paint and brush. And he did for us. He created this giant flying saucer in the middle of the snow at a scale we couldn't do. And he solved some lighting problems for us, because painting a snowscape with the correct light on it is not as easy as you might think. We had to do a lot of work on that. But I'm extremely proud of what he did, and it worked out great.
That we had to find a piece of high ground on the back lot, because I didn't like working from a tower, unnecessary anyway, because the back lot at that time was very plain and very hilly. So we found a high spot and laid the sheets out and just placed the people in the appropriate position. The vital issue in making a match-up work is having things standing in space. If it doesn't look as though what you're painting is actually in space, dimensionally in space, receding from you, which doesn't necessarily simply mean the dissipation of colour and tone. That's simple. It's still to get the feeling that it's there standing in space. If you don't achieve that, you don't achieve anything. It just looks like a painting. Remains two-dimensional.
We decided that refrigerating the stages was really sort of the best thing. We found out that it doesn't have to be really cold as long as the humidity is up. So it was a very careful balancing act of humidifying the air, spraying water overhead to bring that and then bring the temperature down, which happened at one of the hottest summers in Los Angeles in a long time. So it was very strange for us to work in this very kind of cold environment and then step outside in our park is in 102-degree heat to watch the tourists going by on the trams on the tour and have them wonder, why are these people wearing this clothing?
The thing for me was, on The Thing, was that the production designing of the movie was so perfect that my job was easier. I could concentrate instead on the acting, telling the story, and the monster. I mean, that was the big job, was to convince the audience that this thing is real.
Well, Rob Bottin has a great sort of strange imagination, and of course his characters likewise, the creatures and so forth. I was really intrigued and challenged by the fact that we would be doing some things that hadn't been done up to that point in creating these illusions. We tried all kinds of things, cranking the camera faster and slower, and under-cranking and shooting the camera upside down so the backwards action looked somehow strange. A lot of different sort of photographic techniques. One of the tricks with working with rubber, whether it's a mask or a makeup appliance, or whether it's a completely fabricated creature, is lighting it carefully so that it looks real, so that there's you don't give away the tricks, the little seams and the paint and the wires and all of the things that are necessary to make it work. And Rob was always very sensitive about his creatures. There was, whether there was too much light on them. We always sort of joked that if it was up to Rob, he would build the creatures, to be incredibly interesting and imaginative, and then not put any light on them because he was afraid of showing them. So it was always a case of Rob wanting less light. So we developed techniques of little tiny spots of light and shadows, and also that you never really looked blatantly at a rubber creature.
I went to visit Rob on the set. He wanted me to help shoot some tests that he was doing of his vibrating dog, and I think when I got there, there were so many 5-gallon pails of KY jelly all over the place that it's like my impression of the film was, gee, I never knew that you could buy KY jelly in 5-gallon pails and have so many of them, in any one place.
They molded my face in a lot of different expressions. They molded my hands, my legs, my torso. They even took photographs of my chest without a shirt on, and they assigned one person to make the hair pattern match. And it was so good that the day we shot the sequence of my chest exploding, I was inside the examining table that my body was supposed to be lying on, so that my head was out. It was really my head, my neck, my shoulders, and my arms. And everything else was the model. And Richard Dicehart is an old pal of mine who played the doctor, the medical doctor, came in that morning, and I was already in the harness, and he said, "Put some clothes on that guy, for God's sake, it's disgusting." And he came running over, and it wasn't until he was right on top of me that he realized that was fake.
It was very funny because it was a one-take situation. We had to make him up and blend this whole body off. It had this interior mechanism that would rip open, right? And what happened was, of course, take one goes awry, after, 10 hours of makeup, right? And Charlie's sitting inside this box and is working on him and stuff. The cameras are all set, tweaking the lighting, getting it all set up, putting little beads of sweat on him and fixing his hair, making sure the rubber doesn't look too shiny and all this stuff. John says, "Action," right? The thing rips open, and I wanted to have a lot of saliva flying all over the place. And unfortunately what happened was it looked like a fountain in Las Vegas. it came out and it just looked like there should be showgirls dancing out of his stomach and stuff. And John goes, "Cut! Thank you very much, Mr. Bottin." You know, like that. He goes, "What happened?" You know, he goes, "That was horrible."
And it was about 6:30 or 7 by the time we got the second shot. I spent the entire day strapped in this harness. Took my back a week or two to recover, but everyone was pleasant. In fact, the worst part of it was every 2 seconds, somebody would come by and say, "You all right, Charlie? You all right, Charlie?"
You know, what we did is we came in on a shot where you would actually see the mechanism open, and we had, you know, the doctor, you know, actually put his arms in there and then start to close the machine, right? And then we cut. And what we do is we come to another angle, right, where we've actually replicated the doctor's arms perfectly, making it out of Jell-O, right? We made the arms out of Jell-O. We had wax bones built into the arms, and we had rubber veins and gelatin veins and all this stuff, so it was like, you know, living tissue. And at this point, what we did was we actually took a mold of the actor's face that was playing the doctor. And what we did was we actually found a guy that had no arms. His arms were actually cut off here, right, in an injury, an industrial accident, right? And very, very great guy, you know, this guy. And we basically made a prosthetic that actually looked exactly like the doctor and glued it on this person's face. And we glued the gelatin arms onto his arms, right? So we have him in there, and what happens is the stomach is actually hydraulic, you know, so it's made out of something that would be like, you know, same device that a tractor works with and could pick up, you know, a lot of, you know, weight. And when this thing slams shut, it actually rips right through the Jell-O, punctures the plastic veins, which sends blood flying all over the place. And then the actor with no arms, you know, pulls his arms out, and now he's just got the prosthetic damage, you know, on, and blood shooting all over the place, you know. And that's a really good shot in the movie. You know, I mean, that one was really tough to do and very inventive.
When we were at the shop, Rob had already started sculpting a lot of the things, like he sculpted the fused bodies that we find in the Norwegian camp. And that was lying on the floor when I walked by the first time, and I just remember thinking, this is incredible art. This is amazing, grotesque art that he's created here. The same thing with the big fused dog thing. It was actually before they put all the hair and the slime and everything, and all that pink slime, all that drippy stuff, and the pieces of king crab claws or whatever the hell he used for that. Before he put all that stuff on it, it was an amazing piece of sculpture. Just beautiful. I mean, grotesque, horrible, but also very beautiful.
So what I did was I was so, you know, wanting this stuff to come out so great, I actually lived at Universal for 1 year and 5 weeks without taking a day off. I worked, you know, 7 days a week, never took a day off, you know. And I was there night and day. Night and day, I'd sleep on the sets. You know, a Carpenter would come in. "Where's Rob?" You think, "Oh, he's in the locker room, you know, or he's in the lab," you know. And then he'd wake me up. "Hey, you know, we got to shoot this thing or whatever." And I ended up, you know, working so hard that I ended up in the hospital at the end of the show. John looked at me and he said, "You don't look well." He goes, "Somebody take this guy to the hospital."
The burn, I remember the burn when David Clennon's eruption, and then we burned him. That was probably the biggest effect day that we all worked. And the guy who did the burn was I don't remember his name, but he was a specialist at doing these full body burns, and that was very impressive and spooky to be a part of, because what happened is he can't breathe once he's ready to go, because if he does, he'll sear his lungs. He has to do the whole thing holding his breath, and it's all a matter of timing. And then the minute he came off, he had to be put out and immediately, you know, freed so he could draw breath and stuff.
Rob Bottin did the special makeup effects, and Roy Arbogast did the set special effects, the explosions and so forth. But they worked together in one area, and that was in terms of certain construction for the thing, certain size that Rob couldn't handle. In other words, his little team could go so far. So they intermeshed at one point and began a collaboration to pull off that last creature coming up out of the floor and opening up. That was a huge monstrosity. And the size of it was amazing. So we had a lot of work to do.
The first part, which was the pass where he actually has to run underneath the floorboards, that was done by Roy Arbogast. And what they did was they built actually like a train track underneath the floorboards. They put like a huge ball, metal ball on it, and they actually dragged it with a huge cable mounted to a winch that actually was a high-speed winch. So they just flipped the thing, and then this ball would roll underneath and just break all the floorboards up, and that looked very impressive. Then what we see is the floor being ripped up, and now we see this, image of Wilford Brimley rising up out of this hole, sort of stuck to a huge tentacle, with all these tentacles that are writhing off of it. His chest actually rips open. This dog starts to struggle out. And because we wanted to open up the scope of what we were seeing, we decided to use animation. And there's this guy, Randy Cook, who's brilliant at stop-motion animation. I worked with Randy before, known him for quite a while, and asked him if he would actually do this, the wide shot, which would basically be the worm, the Blair monster, comes up through the floor, and now we're back really far, and we see, oh God, it's huge, and tentacles come flopping out on the deck, and then, we'll cut to a medium shot of the dog actually starting to rip through, Brimley's, chest, and then we'll come back to the wide shot and actually see the dog leap out and land on the floor right in front of Kurt. And so actually, Randy and his crew set to making a miniature version of the whole set, and it was absolutely beautiful, really wonderful. In the final picture, what happened was Carpenter had the sequence cut together and felt that at the end of the day, his eye could detect that there was, stop motion animation in the picture. And at this point in time, again, that, since this was done, many years ago, we actually didn't have the use of a computer, which would kind of, smooth out the animation a little bit. And so, John decided that, no, we're not going to use the animation in the picture, even though it was beautifully executed.
The conditions are almost unbelievable to imagine shooting a movie in. And somehow there's a part of me that wonders how we ever survived it. We had such problems, all the way down to the cameras. We had to leave them in the cold because we couldn't take them from the warm out into the cold, inside and outside, because the lenses would mist up. I mean, the whole approach was one of just trying to push this giant rock up a mountain. We had no comforts. And it was a dangerous spot. Make no mistake about it. We were in a very dangerous spot shooting this movie. And I think that some of the reality of that showed. I know the cast members bonded together, and they really became their characters. They were really standing out in the snow dealing with the problem.
People could go up there for long stays. They'd bring cassettes and records and books, and they would get flown in like videos of Super Bowl games and baseball games. The actors tried to mimic that. They tried to copy that.
There's been some great scenes where all 12 men are looking at each other and trying to figure out who's who. If you are my best friend or if you are about to thing out on me and kill me. But my favorite thing in this whole picture is to be able to be up here in a location like this and just be able to shoot up here. It's unbelievably fantastic.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Oh, man. What's going on? We're on, hey, it must be a movie.
Everybody went up every day. So there were many days you just sat around and sort of did nothing except look at how beautiful it was. That was the extraordinary thing. Even though it was 20 below, the gear we wore after a few days of acclimation kept you warm.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We won't have that white situation over there. Right. So I think we'll be okay. What we might want to do is we could just do a little pullback, say clear
good idea to come back,
into here, and then
come into the situation here. That sounds good.
And maybe put Palmer fooling with the hydraulics in the front of the blade here.
All right, good.
The reviews were mixed, I think, with the audience, and there was an alternate ending to the film that was shot. I had spoken to John about this. I had said that I felt, well, gee, this is a terribly nihilistic ending. It's very much of a downbeat. Perhaps we should protect ourselves while we have the principal, Kurt, and just shoot an ending where we see that he survives. And John was open to this, so essentially what he did was he staged a scene in which Kurt has been rescued and is sitting in a kind of a small office structure, and he's just had a blood test so that we know that he's not infected. And he has survived this ordeal rather than the kind of mutual death that concludes the film now.
A lot of the things, though, that bothered the audience more than the monster were the poking around the monster, and poking around human beings that had been burnt. And it was like we all associated to it in terms of it's like gutting a deer. It doesn't. It's part of life. If you hunt and you take the meat, you got the deer, and it's. I guess it's ugly the first 2 or 3 times you do it, but then after a while, that's what you do with you take them out, you remove them, and clean it, get the meat clean, and then you cut the meat up. All of that kind of when you're doing it, if somebody's not used to doing it, they look at that and they go, this is horrible, but they don't have any problem going to the store and buying that wrapped piece of meat. So they just don't see the other part of it. So in this movie, you see that part. We realized that those parts were probably going to be, to a large degree, rejected. Again, I thought it was great that John didn't stop doing the movie that he set out to do. And I'm very happy that the movie did find its audience. And that it found its audience 20 years or 15 years later was, to a great degree, expected.
People always come up to me and say, my favorite movie you were in was, a lot of times this happens, that they come up with The Thing as the thing that they like the best. But it's as someone else has probably said, this film found its audience not in the theaters at the time. It wasn't a huge hit. It did okay. But in video and on cable, and since then on video, it has a very loyal, very intense following, and that's always fun. I've been involved in several of those that haven't gone through the roof in the box office, but in certain ways have an afterlife that's much stronger than films that have gone through the roof at the box office.
It was so much fun to be with that cast and that director and that crew. You had like 60 little boys with helicopters and flamethrowers and guns and a monster, and we're up in the Arctic, and it was a gas, man. It was like going out and playing cops and robbers when you were a kid. It was a fantastic experience in a wild and unpredictable place with just once again, I have to say, just a tremendous cast and crew. It was just so much fun.
It's a good film, and it'll survive for that reason, It might not be an instant success, but I feel that it has legs in the sense that people will enjoy seeing it, and probably more so as the years go on.
I think that at the time when The Thing was released, it was an innovative, very kind of unusual journey for an audience. And I think that it came across an interesting phenomenon, which was, at the time, we also had a very friendly alien that came to visit the Earth in the form of E.T. And it was a case of an audience at the time feeling probably more comfortable with a friendly alien, and the fact that that the sort of dark edge of The Thing was something that wasn't sort of appreciated at the time. It's
since turned into what they call a cult film, and it seems like everybody has seen it on video or on television or something. It set a standard for special effects. I think that the people who like that kind of movie went and saw it anyway.
The interesting thing about The Thing, right, and the fact that it was actually done a long time ago, people actually think that the imaging and the special effects and the creature work or whatever hold up to this day, even in light of the fact that there are computer graphics and things now. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's you just can't beat wild imagination, and no matter how you do it, as long as it's executed very well, You just can't pierce through the magic.
There are some movies that you do. I've done more, I guess, than my fair share of them. And I do think that, maybe that I have to sort of look at that and realize something, that I have a tendency to like movies that aren't going to perhaps be accepted at the time. And if they're done well, though, they will be accepted later on. And I think that with the advent of video, that's a great... I'm very happy about that, because ultimately you're making movies for the enjoyment of as many people as possible. And I like that there's video and that people can take it and make their judgment later on, and perhaps without the politics of the time or without whatever's in the air at the time to set a tone to get in the way of just the project and just the story itself.
There's a very somber kind of inevitability to the film. As it begins, you're seeing a helicopter flying, and they're chasing a dog, and already it feels like the end of the world to me. And that's what this is. This is an apocalyptic movie. This is the first of 3 films that I've worked on that have an apocalyptic theme, and I've dealt with them in different ways. This is the end of the world. It doesn't come from bombs dropping. It comes from within. And it was a movie that's tone started and finished. And basically it was almost there's nothing you can do, because here it comes. And of course the thing is a metaphor for whatever you want to say. It's disease, could be AIDS, could be whatever, but it comes from within you. It's also basically the lack of trust that's in the world now. We see it all over, countries, people. We don't trust each other anymore. We don't know who to trust. We're with somebody that we think maybe they're our loved ones, and they may attack us. And that's what the thing is. It has a lot of truth in it, kind of dressed up as a monster movie.